Excellent. Well, welcome participants. We'll be waiting a couple of minutes before we start. So always the slightly different, and it's actually great for our topic when we actually go, when we start the topic, but just as people arrive, how it's always, the virtual is so different to if you're doing this on stage and people are already seated and you're arriving. It's almost the other way around in a virtual environment compared to a physical one.
Yeah. Kate Fazio, oh, you're still in WA, Kate?
I am. Yeah.
Are you stuck there now, Kate? Fazio, or not?
Not officially stuck, choosing to be stuck. Yeah, we'll probably stay till January, I think.
Mm.
It's good. That's a good plan.
Mm. It's quite a lovely little bubble. If you're happy to be here, I'm just very conscious of how, compared to sort of my family overseas, how we can live very normally, and you can you can forget what's actually happening elsewhere, because we're just living like normal.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's almost like COVID hasn't happened here.
Yeah.
It's great. Long may it last.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, there's plenty of boats offshore with COVID on them.
Mm.
Yep. We're approaching now. We're going to, just for the participants who have joined, we will be kicking off the webinar in probably about 2 or 3 minutes. Just waiting for a few people to come in, just to make sure we've got a full quorum. There's been a large number of registrations. Okay, we'll give it 1 more minute to allow a few people to come in before we start. And thanks, John, for the comment about being in happy lockdown, Victoria. Get ready for the exodus. Hopefully not too much longer. Okay, so I will start then. So welcome to our second masterclass in the series. I'm very excited about this one. We're going to be talking about the impact of technology on the law. We're going to be a wide-ranging conversation. So before I introduce the speakers, I would just like to show my respect and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, of elders past and present, on which this meeting takes place. And obviously, because it's virtual, that's a large number of different places. As I said, we're going to be discussing technology and its impact on the law, how our systems and processes are changing, and how that's actually been accelerated by the impact of COVID. And whether COVID's a one-off and then it comes back, we go back to normal, whatever normal is, or actually if we get to a new normal and COVID's just accelerated us to a place where we're going to go anyway. Some of this will relate to the courts. We will talk a little bit about the courts and e-filing, etc. But a lot of it is actually evident, as Kate Fazio said in an earlier call with me, is evident by and highlighted by speakers, but that legal practice itself is changing. And the court's just the end or the tip of the spear, if you like. There's a lot more that goes on before you reach the courts, and a lot of the disruption and the change is happening there as well. A few items of just to think about while you're going. If you want to ask a question, the Q&A box is at the bottom. Now you can actually upvote a question. So if you want to, have a look at what other questions have been asked and vote them up. That way we will highlight the ones that are most upvoted, and those will be the ones we jump in and answer as we go. So I'd like to introduce our speakers. First, Kate Offer. Kate Offer is the Senior Lecturer and Director of Disruption at the University of Western Australia Law School. So I believe it's 10 o'clock in the morning there, Kate. Slightly
9 o'clock, actually.
9 o'clock.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, we've
always
shifted
forget
summertime now.
I always forget about summertime. So thanks so much for doing this a bit earlier in the day.
Pleasure. Pleasure.
So your academic interests lie in the intersection of law and technology, and you are the inaugural Director of Disruption at the law school, where she engages and leads in the law and technology space. Her role considers how technology is changing legal practice and how it can be used to teach more effectively, enabling graduates to be better prepared for the legal profession. And the legal profession itself is changing, so it's a very challenging role you've got. You're also the co-author of the Western Australia Evidence Law, and have won the Women Lawyer of the Year Award in 2020 by the Women Lawyers of the Western Australia Association. So it's great to have you on the panel, Kate.
Thank you for having me.
And our other speaker is Kate Fazio. So Kate Fazio is the Head of Innovation and Engagement at Justice Connect. She's a lawyer, technologist, and journalist with a master's in social impact, and she brings a unique intersectional lens to her work to improve access to justice in Australia. Kate's role at legal services charity Justice Connect to do incredible work across the country. She leads an interdisciplinary team that develops products and strategies to increase access to justice. So Kate, I was reading on the website a bit earlier how you'd gone and got Google to sponsor the start, $250,000 to sponsor the start of some of the work you're doing, which is great to get a big technology giant in to help with access to justice. You've won many, many awards, including the 2020 Telstra Businesswomen's Award for Purpose in Victoria, and the 2019 Victorian Premier's Design Award in Service Design. And I think service design is going to be a key part of what we talk about today. It's not so much about technology, it's about service design. So welcome, Kate Fazio. It's great to have you on the panel.
Thank you.
And the third person on the panel is Sean Mukherjee. So Sean is the Executive Manager for Core Product at LexisNexis. So Sean and I work quite closely together. And she leads cross-functional teams developing innovative legal technology products at the nexus of how content and technology interact, because LexisNexis is a technology business, a content business, but technology is increasingly changing the way we serve our content up to our customers. Sean's experience covers a range of areas, including legal analytics, data mining and visualization, machine learning and AI, content creation, storage, conversion, user experience, and information architecture. And obviously those are also, there's a nexus of a lot of change going on there as to how do we make information much more easily able to be consumed, but ultimately what does that mean about the workflows of the legal industry that use our products. And Sean's recent focus has been on analytics, machine learning and AI, mostly importantly as tools for better interpreting and navigating the multidimensional problem space created by the legal and the social landscape. So Sean, great to have you on the panel. Just one piece of housekeeping before we jump straight in. You can use the LexisNexis Masterclass hashtag if you want to post about this at any time, and we'll follow that and retweet it or repost it. Maybe not just on Twitter. And it'll be great to have that ongoing conversation going on. Also means that this conversation can continue past the end of today. So before we jump into ask some questions, I'm going to throw up a quick poll question. And that's going to be, has COVID-19 accelerated a permanent technological shift to meet the digital expectations of consumers? And there's a lot in that question, and it's a simple binary answer from the audience. But really, it's going to be an interesting question we can unpick, especially what are the digital expectations of consumers. So if you can jump on as a participant and vote on that, and we'll bring that up as a question we look to answer a little bit later. Excellent. Let's jump into the questions then and the conversation. And hopefully this will get very quickly into a conversation because I'm very excited about where we can go, and there's such good experience on the panel. So my first question really is to you, Kate Fazio. So Justice Connect, you've done some amazing stuff. And I had a look at your Gateway project, which really is focused on human-centered design. So how do you talk to help seekers, and how do you actually help them to find, connect, and use your service? Have you pivoted at all through COVID, or is it just business as usual for you?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. Our Gateway project started in 2017, and what that project sought to do was look at the way that Justice Connect works across the entire organisation and all of our stakeholders. So from the people that we're trying to assist, that's people that don't know they have a legal problem, people who are service users, people who've exited our service, as well as the broader social sector, people that we are trying to get referrals from, and the pro bono lawyers that we work with as well, both firms and barristers and sole practitioners in the mix too. So we were looking at that whole landscape and asking the question, what is the experience of us for all of those critical people that we're engaging with? Because it's a complex organisation and we need all of those interactions to be working well for us to be working efficiently and impactfully. And so out of all that research, took 12 months, we ended up designing 3 key products that were going to improve the way that we work. So an intake system, a referral system, and a pro bono portal. And luckily for us, all of those 3 products were launched by mid-2019. So we had the whole ecosystem really up and running, and we'd started to see enormous benefits from having each of those different products and systems well embedded by the end of 2019. So what that meant was when we had the bushfires hit in early 2020 and then COVID follow, so those twin compounding crises that both drove legal need in the community, Justice Connect was positioned to really respond at scale to both of those crises. So it was a matter of timing. We were very, very fortunate that we had managed to get all those products released and embedded in that year prior. So what we have seen is, because we had all that infrastructure in place, our service volumes have increased enormously. We're working with 160 law firms across Australia, referring pro bono matters to them through our pro bono portal. Our inquiries have gone up enormously. We also have a big suite of online products, and they are being accessed 500% more this year than the year prior. So the numbers that we're looking at are just enormous. So you could say it's business as usual in the new sense, in terms of those products were already in place, but the volumes that we're talking about are not business as usual. The volumes speak to this enormous unmet need in the community, and thankfully, because those products are in place, we're actually able to meet that need, or at least strive to.
And have you coped just in the back end? The technology, I mean, the technology has helped you, but 500% increase in volume, that's enormous. I mean, have you had to ramp up people, or has technology just made you more efficient?
Yeah, so the 500% increase is the consumption of our online self-help products.
Oh, right,
our
okay.
provision of one-to-one legal advice has more close to doubled. It's different in different areas of our services. One of the key ways that we've driven that volume increase is through pro bono lawyers. So Justice Connect works, we have our own lawyers in-house, and we also refer out to pro bono lawyers. Sometimes we do that just by making a full referral. We pass a person over to a law firm. Sometimes we do that by bringing those pro bono lawyers into Justice Connect to help bulk out our workforce. So we've done both of those things to meet the increased volume. We're making double the number of referrals out to pro bono at the moment, and we're also bringing more pro bono lawyers into Justice Connect to help meet that increased demand as well. So pro bono has been very critical in us being able to address that increased need.
And having that ecosystem of the 3 different solutions up and running, and the fact that they're interconnected, sounds like that was a critical need before COVID hit.
Absolutely. I don't think we would have been able to do that scale up to the extent that we have had we not had those products in place. We would have just been using our older kind of spreadsheet based systems, and they're just much harder to scale. Yeah,
completely. So I'll throw a question to you, Kat, but then in that sort of world in which technology is enabling this scaling, but also it's very much focused on the people that are across the workflow. Is there something that academia can help in that space? Is there something that the legal profession can look to academia to help with how do you take technology and embed it in your processes?
Look, I do. It's a very tricky question. And I think as the world changes, and as Kate has pointed out, we've had an understatement to say this has been a year of rapid change. And the change itself, I think, is welcome. The circumstances that led to the change, perhaps not. But I think this has just seen an incredible uptake. When something that we might have expected to have seen these sorts of changes 5-10 years down the track, but I think the COVID-19 scenario has just.
Sorry, Kate, just a second. Do you mind slightly leaning in?
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, carry on.
Yeah, so we've seen a real uptake, and I think everyone is sort of struggling to process what is going to stay and what is just particular to this particular situation. So I think there's that, although I think a lot of changes will obviously remain. Academia is not known for being quick off the mark.
No, but your study is.
No. However, and of course we have our constraints, which is of a lot of frustration to many, is that we are still constrained by the Priestley 11. And so we find there is limited space in a law degree as it currently exists to incorporate what I really see as skill development and content that we need to equip the students of today to move into the legal profession and actually create positive change in the legal profession as well. So look, what I notice is that we've got a lot of idealistic young people coming through. Although I think it's an overstatement to think of the young people as completely au fait with technology. They're not as much as us Generation X's would like to rely on, but still they've grown up with technology. And law has always been such a hierarchical. Experience is valuable, and that's of course still the case. But as we see these massive changes, I think young people, particularly the young people of today, have a lot of underlying skills that we could really leverage to take the legal profession forward. But of course, there are some shifts that need to happen in sort of the law schools as well to enable us to really embrace that. So we do what we can, but I think there's a bigger conversation around what a law degree should look like.
Yes. And it opens up an interesting question, because I noticed, Kate Fazio, when you guys designed what you did it in a co-design way where you reached out to a lot of partners and you built it the way, I've got a tech background, the way a tech company would build. But law seems to me to be a lot more hierarchical, and it's quite hard if you're young to get that sort of co-design. How do we all get into a room? And everybody's got an equal voice. You might know more about the law and how it works, but I might know more about tech, and therefore we have an equal voice. And some of it's cultural, and I'm just wondering how we get over that sort of cultural co-design, how we do that together. Sean, I might throw it to you just quickly. I know we as a business do quite a lot of co-design with our customers. Have you seen any changes in the last 6 months as a result of COVID as well, that sort of changed the way they are thinking about innovation and how we build new solutions?
They do seem more open to conversations about innovation than previously. So I think that people are always interested in enhancements and improvements, something that's going to make their life better. But in terms of actually adopting on a regular basis the benefits from those enhancements, the profession has been slower to adopt those enhancements than perhaps they might have telegraphed initially. So there's value. People see value when you talk to them about how we're going to make their lives easier, but then actually using the new tools is a different thing, because the cognitive load in terms of what lawyers are thinking about, and this is where service design, coming back to Kate's point, is so important. the cognitive load is about the matter at hand. It's about their client. It's about the research task. So there's very little left in terms of bandwidth in their brain for determining what this new feature is going to do for them and how they actually navigate this new tool in order to make the most of what we're giving them. There is, so we've seen some lag in terms of adopting new features until recently, and people are much more engaged, I think, at the moment with really coming to grips with, because they've had to be, right? I mean, the whole hierarchy of needs has sort of been tipped on its head because of COVID. So they've had to grapple with, for the first time, more digital ways of engaging with information and ways of getting more value out of the digital format, because they don't have the backstop of going back to whatever their previous workaround was. So we are getting a lot more feedback now and a lot more interest in having people at all levels of the profession engage with us in terms of what we want to do next and how to make their lives easier, which is great.
It is great. It is great. I actually like what Fazio, when you said the experience of us, it changes the way you think about how you approach your customers, right? Because suddenly it's how do they experience us? Do you want to take us a little bit further through how you did that, that service design? What's your service design thinking? How does that even work? How do you approach building something?
Absolutely. And I think it's related to something that both Kate and Sean touched on, which is thinking about the law as a system and as a service, as opposed to, I think, the way that a lot of lawyers are trained to think about the law, which is on this problem by problem basis. And I think a lot of legal academia is still really focused on legal decision making, looking at jurisprudence, and much less interest and focus in the legal world on law as a system and a service. And so what service design as a discipline does is bring us into that space, which is a really interesting space to be in. And a lot of other industries have been in that space for a long time. And so I think service design is a tool. That's all it is. It's a tool you can use to try to shift your thinking and bring in some new perspectives about how you operate. And for Justice Connect, it was a really, really valuable tool. And we used codesign as well, as you said, Greg. And what we did was stop thinking like lawyers for a bit and just put that on pause and start thinking about ourselves in a service context. And of course, we had thought these things in different ways at different points in time, but by putting in place this structure around the thinking, it really forced us to grapple with some tricky questions. And it forces you to really stop and listen and then make some choices and trade-offs. So the actual process that we followed, and this is where our Google seed funding was so valuable. So Google funded us to essentially do a 12-month research process. And that research involved co-design with all those different user groups that I spoke about, where we didn't just do focus group type research. We actually put prototypes and products in front of people and got their reactions and provocations. And we used a range of other exercises like user journey mapping and storytelling to really deeply interrogate and try to understand that experience of us, that experience of the system, and then start to understand what would change if we put this in place. How would that change that experience? What would change if we put something else here? How would that change that journey? How would that change how you feel? And we started to get this deep understanding of all the different parts of our organization, all the machinery of it, and identify all these different opportunities we had to either make little tweaks or make some seismic changes, some really big shifts in how we work. And that was driven by a desire to deliver more impactful services, which is about the outcome. It's about the experience of us, and it's also about efficiency. So doing the most that we can with our resource packet, but doing that in a way, when you're in a service setting, it's not just about churning things out, because when you're looking for impact, it's about getting more things done in a good way with a high impact. So that was kind of the frame that we brought to that, and we used that direct experience to inform the way that we then did our design work and made our decisions.
That is very cool. And also the fact that it's not just about the experience, it's also about how efficient you are and that you're getting the right outcomes or the best outcomes, because that's ultimately how you do the service delivery. Yeah.
And what we've done since then is we I guess put together a set of, aspirations and a vision, and we're now able to measure our progress against those aspirations and that vision. So we're able to track how we're going, and if we're not heading in the right direction, then we stop and we change. So it's not set and forget. We have some really clear goals and a really clear approach that we're working towards. So we're constantly assessing ourselves against that, and we're constantly looking at what we can do to get closer to that.
So that really goes back to, I mean, as you said, experiments, which is a lot of the ways an IT business now works. So you measure yourself, and then you experiment. I'm just throw this to Kate after. Is that something that you've seen much across the legal industry or in your research? Because I mean, I think that experiment-oriented approach is quite revolutionary for a lot of businesses.
I think it's mixed, and I think there are some. I think I notice it's generally the sort of the more the smaller and more agile businesses that are able to sort of pivot towards a more experimental approach. I think some of the larger firms, they're just such. I mean, moving quickly for a large firm is not necessarily easy. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly becoming more common, and I think there's an awareness of, particularly for younger practitioners, that they have more opportunities if they're willing to change the way and think sort of around how legal services have to be delivered. So I think there is more an air of experimentation. We're actually offering a new unit on that. It's called Legal Business Practices, and I think part of the idea behind that is empowering young people to know that. I mean, obviously there are licensing requirements, of course, but that actually they have more knowledge than they think they do. That yes, there's sort of knowledge around the law and that experience around the legal knowledge and the content, but that they can actually sort of be much more experimental with how those legal services are delivered. And I couldn't agree more with what Kate has said, that that law, I don't think, has traditionally seen itself as customer focused. And I think that is changing, but it's a slow process. It is a slow process, and I think it's going to be customer driven. So some of those smaller, sort of younger firms are going to have an advantage in that space. Moving forward, as I said, I think the pandemic has really catalysed a lot of those changes.
Yeah. And I don't think that's just legal industry. I think all big companies are struggling with that.
Yes.
The fact that smaller firms can get access to really good tech easily because it's in the cloud and it's easy to do, and they can be far more responsive to customers. Where big companies, and I include our own in this, it's quite hard to change your internal processes because you've got a lot of people involved. Yeah. And we've got a question from the floor from Harvey. How do the present solutions address key issues of access to justice? So really thinking about this from an access to justice perspective, it's probably for you, Kate Fazio. But the questions around things like costs, time billing, avoiding garbage in, garbage out situations. So essentially making it more efficient, but ensuring that access to justice is achieved.
Yeah, so it's probably helpful if you're speaking to Justice Connect's present solutions. The role that they play in access to justice is our intake system helps Justice Connect be more accessible. So we're really concerned about the question of how do people know about us? How do they find us? How do they engage with us? What's the experience of applying for help like? How long does that take? They're all the questions we're interested in. So the intake system is designed to improve that, and it absolutely is improving that. We're getting more people in, we're getting more people through, we're doing that more quickly. They're rating their experience of that to be improved. And in the past, Justice Connect, the only way you could apply for help with us was by phone. the phone was open between particular hours of the day. You often had to leave a message and you'd get a call back. There's a really interesting assumption in a lot of community legal practices that people would prefer to apply over the phone. Our research showed that it depends which cohort we spoke to, but between 40 and 60% of people would prefer to make an application online, which is really interesting. And we see that we continue to survey our users. Of course, there's a really important cohort that really want to talk to someone on the phone, and that is still an option that's available at Justice Connect. But what we're doing is we're building out a menu of ways that you can engage with us, so that we're trying to meet people where they are, engage with them in the way that suits them, that is most convenient for them, so that we're not putting up unnecessary blockers to engagement. And our referrer system, which is how we get our sector peers to send people to us, has very similar aims. It's about making that engagement easier, more accessible, working for them. A lot of, if we're working with hospitals, they are seeing people all through the night. So it doesn't work for them if we only have a phone-based referral system, for example, and that phone is only open during business hours. And the Pro Bono portal that we've developed is about efficiently using the pro bono resources that are available in our pro bono network. So that's about us being able to get a real-time view of where does capacity lie, so that we can more efficiently match up unmet need with that pro bono capacity. So that's a platform, and that's delivering us better efficiencies and better ways to unlock that pro bono resource, which means that the flow and benefit for access to justice is more lawyers are doing more pro bono.
Yep, it helps a lot. Just conscious of the things we wanted to get through, so I might pause there. We do have a few other questions on this topic, and I think we could probably spend the whole time just talking about this, but I think the whole service-oriented design, experiment, and actually make sure you listen to your customer is a strong message that, and we will post some up. There's been a few questions in the chat around are there tools available online that people can learn from how to do this? And I know they are in the tech world, but I think post this, we'll probably put some stuff up around, here's some tools you can go and learn about customer-centered design. Some nice links for our audience. That'd be great. So I might now switch just a little bit to some of the cool tech stuff that goes on. And in particular, something which I think is a little bit disruptive and something we may worry about, but also there may be advantages to it. And that is the concept of judge analytics. I know we're switching topics quite quickly here, but if you look at the fact that once you've got, and just to put it in context for the audience, when you've got a digital system, you've got far more measurement points, as you probably found, Kate Fazio, when you rolled out your system. There's far more measurement points, and as a result, you can learn a lot more about what you do. But that also means you can AI learn, an artificial intelligence machine can learn about what you do and help you to optimize it. It also means that if the courts are digitized, you can learn about what judges judge, and off that you can start to learn things around the analytics around what a judge does. So Sean, I might throw it to you. Do you want to just further expand on what judge analytics is? And then we might open up as to whether or not it's a good or a bad thing.
Sure. So judge analytics is the most controversial part of legal analytics because, so I'm glad we jumped right in there. Yeah. Although it's up there with win-loss outcomes, which is also very sensitive. It's the idea that you can get to know a judge better by reviewing all of their cases in detail and then specifically tailor your argument just for that judge, and sort of see the trends in the way that judge operates. And I don't fully understand, it's different in code systems, but in a common law system like ours, I don't fully understand the outrage, to be honest, because that's what lawyers do anyway, right? I mean, to some extent, it would be negligent in the soft use of that word to go in front of a judge without having some idea of what that judge had already said on the subject that you were going to be arguing about, right? So this is really a question of scale, as most analytics is, right? So the fundamental thing about analytics, and indeed AI and machine learning, is that we're taking human data and data mining it, and then allowing people to operate across that data at scale. And that can be alarming for people for a number of reasons, because if you are perpetuating errors at scale, that's problematic. But getting that bird's eye view, that's I think it's just going to be, I think it's teething problems in terms of cultural acceptance, and we'll get there eventually. We've certainly seen the US go there. And apart from other things that are happening, in fact, at this very moment in the US, I don't think that that's what's driving the end of the world over there. So, yeah, so, I mean, analytics, it's another way of getting to grips with the legal landscape. And don't we all want to do that better? Because then the quicker we get to grips with the landscape as it sits when you're doing your research, the faster you can do things to potentially change the landscape. You know, it reveals where we have issues. It shines a spotlight on that so that we can then remediate. And that seems really important to me from an access to justice point of view. If it's a, you know, efficiency metrics, how quickly are we getting through cases? How quickly are we dealing with our case management processes and improvements assisting? Are there substantive biases in what we're seeing? How do we fix that? We fix that by examining it. So I'm yay analytics all the way, team analytics.
I might throw that to you, to Kate, after, because you've obviously done quite a lot of research in this space. I mean, what do you think of, I mean, analytics in general, I suppose you can look at it in different lenses. The one is we just do bulk measurement and we gain insights as to it. The rest, then the further, which we'll get to, is AI and ML, where you start to actually get in the decision process. So maybe start first, then go to the second.
Look, I agree. I'm team analytics all the way too. I'm a fan of information, and as Sian said, there is everybody knows if they're appearing in front of a court, as Sian said, you're going to have a sense of, oh, I've got this particular judge. This particular judge may come from, for example, in my area, the torts, may come from an insurance background, which means that the plaintiff might have to work a little harder to convince the judge. That's just humanness. And I think that's always been something that has been the subtext of every decision. And I imagine as a judge, it must be very uncomfortable to feel that your judgments could be analysed in this way, because, again, we like to think that the law is this sort of, completely objective system that is applied objectively at all times. But why should that be the case? Of course it's not. The judges that are making these decisions are humans. And we all come with our worldviews that we would then see a legal conundrum through. And so I think it's perhaps time to put that fiction to rest, that this is just this completely objective system. So from that perspective, no, I think that legal analytics has a really important role to play. And in any event, whether we like it or not, it's coming. And that's the other thing too. We can have our issues with it, but I think it is that horse has bolted, and it's only going to get more and more effective. So from that perspective, information is good. We are in a world now where data is easy to come by, and so that it is easy then to put a more systematic lens on the decisions that the courts make, and I don't have a problem with that at all. I think the potential is the danger to which that information can be used, and I think that's what you're addressing in that second question there. That's a whole other matter altogether. To use that information to guide is one thing. To use that information to make a decision is another thing. And so we're certainly, I don't think the technology is there yet anyway, although it's, well, who knows how far away it is. It's still, I suspect it's still a few years off. But that's not to say that it can't have uses in the future. So Richard Susskind has written a very, as all his books, to be honest with you, a really thought-provoking book about online courts, which has come out very recently. And he sort of talks about the use to which this type of, the use of AI to actually resolve disputes, depending on how it's used in the future. I mean, it is potentially something that can solve this very real access to justice problem. And I think he cites statistics sort of around sort of, I think only 46% of people on planet Earth at this time have access or are governed by the rule of law and could potentially have access to a court to resolve a dispute. Even those people that do have access to courts, there's still a massive backlog, and it's really only people who have the means to bring their action to court that have any hope of having a third party resolve their issues. I think he also talked about in Brazil, there are currently 100 million people who have matters before the court. There's this massive backlog. Yeah, I mean, obviously a massive population in Brazil too, but and so these are the sorts of problems that artificial intelligence, artificial legal analytics in terms of judging could potentially help solve. That to me is a good thing. How it's used is another matter altogether, and obviously it would need to be regulated very clearly and and carefully, and I think it would need obviously to have some form of human oversight. But nevertheless, I think the potential for solving access to justice problems is its benefit. And that's, to me, as I said, ultimately an extremely good thing.
Completely. I look at the world of chess where they have the concept of the centaur, which is a human with guidance. And they've tended to now win the world of chess. You know, there's a big blue or deep blue came along and won. But then they've actually found that human working with computer is actually the best outcome. And potentially that's the same, exactly. You get more efficient and you get potentially better judgments, which you can then measure because you've got the analytics to measure them.
That's right. That's right. And I think, as I said, when we talk about machine learning, I think it's really important to remember they're not learning in the same way that a human learns. It's not the same cognitive process. And so, you know, we've all seen those horror science fiction movies where the robots take us over. That's not anywhere near where we're at. And as I said, I think humans still possess the advantage. And it's our humanness that is what could make this system. So I think you're absolutely right. I'm always conscious of that, you know, that taco act, you know, soft or hard tacos, por qué no los dos? I mean, that's exactly how I feel with AI and humans. Por qué no los dos? It doesn't have to be either or. And I think the best solution is both.
It's the hybrid. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, a key part of what a human judge needs to do is consider also the moral, social impact of whatever the decision is, and to think about things in a teleological fashion, right? They're not just applying the law to the set of facts in front of them. They're also thinking about the outcome, not just in this instance, but what that'll mean for the principle finally. That whole issue of legal indeterminacy, where the rules are changed by the facts that they're applied to, not just the other way around, means we're never going to get away from human judgment. And the law already recognizes the distinction between, for example, summary offences and more significant offences, and we have different procedures around those, and there's really no reason why we can't apply a similar sort of lens, so that we end up with a hybrid model where we increase the efficiency of the court because justice delayed is justice denied. We get through a lot more of that backlog for the simple things, but we reserve the more complex issues for human judges.
Exactly. Now, it's been a great conversation and the time has whizzed. We've only got 4 minutes left. So what I might do is ask a couple of questions that have come from the audience to make sure that they're covered by us. And some of these are a little bit more practical than some of the theory we've just gone into. The first one is from Eric Fox, just asking around COVID-19 has resulted in temporary changes to remote witnessing of affidavits and statutory declarations. Given the obvious benefit of such arrangements, particularly for clients in remote communities, can we expect this to continue? I would hope so, but I suppose for Kate Fazio and Kate Arthur, do you think this will continue? And the bigger question, I suppose, comes down to identity, which we haven't got to, but a large part of this is how do you prove your own identity? So do we see the inclusion of biometrics and potentially other blockchain technologies, although biometrics and blockchain are completely separate tech, we won't go there. But do you see that identity and, but most importantly, the remote witnessing of affidavits continue and be something that changes what we do, how we do it?
Look, it's a resounding yes for me. I think everyone has seen, again, this pandemic forced a lot of change that was probably overdue, and it would have taken an unnecessarily long time to get to. And I think all of us, well, I mean, even what we're doing here, this is amazing, and we can have conversations throughout Australia. And why do we all need to be in the same place when we can do so much through the internet? It doesn't quite replace the human contact, but it's serving a really great purpose. Yeah. It's the same with the electronic witnessing of signatures. We have the technology. Why aren't we using it more and more? But yeah, you're right. There needs to be sort of a modern version of identity authentication, and they are available because that is the problem, of course. But it's a resounding yes from me.
Yeah, and it goes beyond affidavits as well. We've seen changes to power of attorney rules, guardianship rules, things like that, where in New South Wales in particular, they changed the law recently as a result of COVID to enable digital signing for those types of documents. And Justice Connect often works with really very vulnerable people, especially in our elder abuse service, and we were actually advocating for this change because, of course, there's the edge case risk where that is applied to the detriment of someone. So a power of attorney ends up being granted where it shouldn't have been. But there's also the risk that there's a whole bunch of powers of attorney that aren't granted that would have made someone's life so much better in had they been granted, especially when you're in a health crisis. And so you've got to balance these risks, and lawyers tend to focus on the edge case that is the worst case scenario of the change, but they don't think about the worst case scenario of not making the change.
Of not changing, yeah.
Exactly.
That's such a good point.
And so we get so fixated on but what if this one thing happened to this one person on this edge case, which would of course be terrible, but we also need to think about the majority that are going to benefit from the change and look to what we can do to put safeguards in place to try to mitigate the risks for those edge cases. And as you say, Kate, there are lots of tools that you can use for identity verification. There are lots of approaches in other jurisdictions like America where these things are already happening, where you can try to check that someone isn't executing something under duress. There's lots of different ways that you can do that. So it's not rocket science, and it's great to see that this is finally happening at greater speed in Australia.
Absolutely is. And on that, we've run out of time, and I think we're only about a third of the way through the topics I wanted to talk about. But that is brilliant, though, because I think we've managed to touch on, just some of the things, the service-oriented design, which I think is more important than the tech, very important. Looking at what AI does, and even just some of the simple things like getting our ID identification right, and the fact that a lot of those changes we think are permanent, which is brilliant. So thank you so much, Kate Office. Thank you so much, Kate Fazio and Sean Mukherjee for coming on. And this will be available on recording that the participants can download post this. Have a great afternoon, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.